So welcome back to Learning Partner. From this episode, we are going to discuss interview questions, like how interviewer is going to ask you simple questions on the Angular side, like what you should reply on those questions, right? What should be the points you should mention to every questions. All these points we are going to discuss. In this particular episode, we are going to discuss on Angular overview, right? What are the questions which interviewer might ask you related to the Angular? We are not going to take topic wise questions, just overall Angular related question, right? So first question we will be discussing like how Angular is different, right? So someone might ask like how there are many front end side libraries, right? So how Angular is different? So first thing is like Angular is a framework. So someone will ask you like Angular, just like Angular, React is also there, right? But React is a library and Angular is a framework, right? What does framework means? Framework means it has everything, it has everything what it needs inside it. Means let's say you have to design a simple application. So let's say API call, then directives, the different things, forms and everything, right? Session storage, local storage, the basic things, whatever we need for developing normal web application, everything it needs, it is provided by the Angular framework. Okay, so that is the first point you should mention. Then second point is dependence, two-way data binding, right? Two-way data binding. This is the major advantage we have, right? So if we consider jQuery, JavaScript, so if we have to show some value into any, let's say H1 tag, and after some operation on some button click, we need to show the updated value. So again, we have to select that element, update the existing value. But with two-way data binding, we just have to bind the variable over there using interpolation or property binding. So we don't have to select that element and update the value, right? So this is taken care by default only. So first thing like Angular is a framework, then two-way data binding, and it's a single page application, right? So these three points should be mentioned in your answer at least. I mean, there are many more, like you can mention the advantage of Angular like forms, routing and everything. But these three things should be there in your answer. Like why or how Angular is different from other languages, right? Other languages, right? Then if we coming back to Angular, so normally when HR asks you like, have you worked on Angular 2, have you worked on Angular 12, or have you worked on Angular 16 or 7, 8, 6 also, right? So as an Angular developer, you should be crystal clear that from Angular 2, let's say question will be is Angular 2 and let's say any version like Angular 12 are same. Someone might ask you like just to confuse you, like Angular 2 and Angular 12 are same or not, right? So if you don't have proper knowledge or you have just gone through theoretically and you have just learned the basic topic and you haven't thought it clearly, so you might say like, yes, Angular 2 is a different language and Angular 12 is it? No, it's not different language. From Angular 2, 4, 6, 8, 12 up to 16 now, everything is same. Okay, so from Angular 2, then 4, then 6, 8, 12, 15 and 16, right? All are versions, right? So there might be something different, right, with each version. Otherwise, why they will introduce new version? So basic things are same. So in each versions, basic things are same. What do we mean by basic things now? Basic things mean ng if is same, right? Like ng if is same, ng4 is same, then HTTP client, the way we make it, the API call is same, forms are same. Just in reactive forms, some things are changing. Not everything, just some syntax is there change, in which is also in Angular 15 to 16. So if we are working on an Angular project, these are the most common thing, routing also. same only. So these are the most common things we use when we work on the Angular project. So these are same from Angular 2 to Angular 16. So that's why you should say it clearly that from Angular 2 to Angular 16, everything is same. Just some internal changes are there, some syntax are changing, but overall it is the same Angular. Just version by version, they are trying to increase their internal speed and boiler mechanism and everything, right? So end developer doesn't have to concern that much, right? So this is kind of a tricky question. Normally interviewer will ask. Third question. Now these are very basic two questions which are not related to Angular, which are not related to topic, right? So let's see some of the questions now. So after this, someone will ask you like, what are the major components or major features of Angular, right? So when someone asks you like, what are major features or components, this is not component. This is components with major modules or someone say modules also, right? Means they are trying to ask you like, what are the major concept, okay, or concept also. So everyone will use different words. Someone might say feature, component, module, or concept. So we just have to list down major topics we know, right? So like components, right? Then modules, then directives, then pipes, then services, routing, right? So these are the almost major from what we can say major topics we have, right? So you can say forms also you can say. Forms are not kind of that, but yes, we have a reactive form, so forms are also a topic. So whenever someone asks you like what are the major things we have in Angular, so you just need to mention all these points, right? Let's move on to next question. Now, what is module, right? So module is not module. We say like whenever we create a project, we get one module that is app.module.ts. But if you that is with normal project. But if your project is a lazy loaded module, lazy loaded project, then you might have multiple modules, right? So what are modules? Module is not a part of Angular. First thing, okay. So what is module? So module is not part of Angular. Means it is part of Angular also, but it is not only part of the Angular. Module comes from the JavaScript only, right? So just to uh, define it, like what is module? So simplest definition is like modules are logical boundaries in your application, or it is a simple file, right? Where you can group component, directives, pipes, and services which are related to the application. This is the simplest definition you can get. It is a place where you can group components, directives, pipes, services. What are the things we can create in Angular? We can group that into a module, right? So we are creating a what we can say a box with full of functionalities, right? So this is the simple definition you can tell about the module, right? But what if it is a lazy loaded module? So when it is a lazy loading project, you have if you don't have the lazy loader, so only one module will be there and everything you create in Angular will be registered over there. But if you have multiple module, so you are just separating the code. So this is the first. Modules are logically boundaries in your application, and the application is divided into separate modules to separate the functionality of our application. This definition will be what we can say correct if our project is with lazy loading, because in lazy loading we separate our application into different modules, right? So let's say we have employee module, so all the component, all the pages, services, directives which are going to be needed for employee related components will be in employee module, right? Like that, if you have salary module, so all the component related to salary will be into that module, right? So this is nothing but module, right? Next question is, since in Angular we are working with TypeScript, right? So someone will ask you like, what is TypeScript and is it necessary that we can only use TypeScript in Angular? No. So it is not, we can use plain JavaScript also in Angular. It is not necessary to use TypeScript. Okay. So what is TypeScript? And second, someone will ask like, is it only language we can use in Angular, right? So no, we can use plain JavaScript also in Angular, and I think other one more language is there, Dart or something. I don't recall right now, but one more language is there. So it is not necessary that we should work with TypeScript only. We can work with plain JavaScript also with Angular. But again, you have to write more code and everything. TypeScript gives you very sophisticated way of writing your code in the object-oriented way form, because TypeScript supports some of the features of OOPS, right? Like class, interface. So these things are already present in TypeScript. So TypeScript, first thing, like TypeScript is provided by Microsoft, right? It is a superset of JavaScript, means it is a language. Superset means it is a language which is created by using JavaScript only. Superset of JavaScript, right? Created by Microsoft, right? So now it has some additional features which are not there in the JavaScript, like classes. Now JavaScript also classes types, it doesn't have async await and many more features, right? And compilation time compiles. When we compile the TypeScript, it is normally getting compiled into JavaScript only. Means we write the code in TypeScript, but when we compile it, it is converted into JavaScript only. Why? Because browser only understand JavaScript. It doesn't know TypeScript, it doesn't know Angular, it doesn't know jQuery, it doesn't know React also. It only understand JavaScript. So that is the one more question will be there, that is transpilation. Transpilation. It is a process of converting TypeScript into JavaScript, right? So transpilation word will be there. So yeah, so this is just the this is everything about TypeScript. Like TypeScript is a type superset of JavaScript created by Microsoft. Okay, so since we are using in Angular, it is not created by Angular. It is provided by Microsoft only. Then Angular CLI, right? So basic questions are done. Then while working with Angular, everything we do, everything we create, we run the project, we build the application by some commands, right? So what is that? So Angular CLI. CLI, the long form of CLI is command line interface, right? So command line interface. Now this command line interface word is not related to Angular. It is a global terminology. Wherever you write coding in the command, there we say like it is a command CLI, command line interface. Okay. So Angular CLI is a package which allows us, is a package which we have to install first, right? We install Angular. So with that, we get the Angular CLI, which we use to create project and everything. Means from creating project, from creating components, directives, services, everything is possible in Angular CLI only. Now, someone will cross question this, like suppose I have to create a component, and if I don't want to use the Angular CLI command, so can I create the component? Yes, just create the manually file, right? So like if this is a project, right? So these are various components I have created. If you don't want to create the component by command line interface, if you don't want to create the command by, if you don't want to create the component by that using that command, so simply just create a folder. Let's say admin folder I'm creating. Then inside that, new file, admin dot component dot ts, like that, create html dot ts. Then whatever the code we get here now, that you have to manually create this kind of code, right? So this will be admin component. Then you have to specify the file name also, like that. Here now we specify same thing. So then here resides the answer, like why do we need to use the Angular CLI? Because creating all the files, right? Writing all the code is kind of time consuming now. So Angular does that, Angular CLI does that for you, right? So that is the advantage why you should use the type Angular CLI. Okay. So this is that question. And how do we install it? npm install @angular CLI if you want the latest version, though latest or only Angular CLI will also work. So simple normal definition is a command line interface to scaffold. Scaffold means, let's say if we run the command and ng generate component name. So it is with this single command, it is going to create 4 files and it is going to update your app module. So it is scaffold means it is kind of creating multiple files and creating doing multiple operation with a single command, right? So that is nothing but Angular CLI. Their model we have seen. Now coming back to files. So when we talk about Angular projects, when we first time create the project, so basically some files we get, right? So first important file is package.json. So without package.json file, there won't be an Angular project. Let me just write it down. Package.json, right? Now package.json, it's a JSON file because it has an ending .json. So obviously it is going to contain JSON object. So you can see it is starting with curly bracket and again one property, again curly bracket. So it is just a JSON file, right? So in package.json, it will contain all the packages name and its version. What are the packages you are going to use in your Angular project? All will be mentioned over here. Like that, if you can see, I'm using Bootstrap. So Bootstrap name is here and its version, like which version I'm using, right? So package.json will contain, let me just write it down, will contain packages list along with its version, which are required for your project. Okay. Now, so in that in package.json also we have two separate files, separate objects. First is dependencies and second is dev dependencies. Now, if you are showing experience of more than 2 years, so you will face this question: dependencies and what is dev dependency? Like what are the difference between these two? So dependencies is kind of dependency contains packages which are used for development. Okay. Dependencies will contain packages which are used for development on local as well as on environment. Means when we deploy the application. So dependencies will contain all the packages which are needed for the locally development and when we deploy the application on the server also. So these are the packages which will be part of your build when we build the application and deploy it on the server. So these packages will be part of your build because these are needed to run the Angular. Okay. So these are most important. Then we have dev dependency. So if you see, here are some packages which you might not have used anytime, like CLI, compiler CLI, Jasmine, Core, Karma, TypeScript, right? So these are the things which we don't use while development. So these packages are needed while local development also. When we are working locally, means when we ng serve, right? When we run our application locally, when we are working locally, then only these packages are necessary. When you deploy the build, these packages are not part of your Angular build, right? So these are only necessary for local development. So this is the extra question you might face when if you are appearing for more than 2 years of experience interview question, right? So this is about package.json. Next important file is angular.json. So like angular.json, again, it's a JSON file, right? So it's a object. You can see curly braces again, inside curly braces, so many things are there. So angular.json, since we discuss on the first line, like how Angular is different. Angular is a framework, right? So framework means it's when we create a project, it's just not a library or anything. So it's a framework. So it has a configuration also. Let's say when we talk about .NET, Java, SharePoint, Python, they are kind of a when we create the projects inside that, they all have certain configuration file, right? So just like that, Angular is a framework. So when we create Angular project, we have a configuration file, which is angular.json. So it's a configuration file for project. What are the configuration we are going to do for our Angular project? All will go inside the angular.json, right? So this is the definition you should explain. After that, you can say like if we are using any third party CSS, that we have to mention over here. If you are using third party JS, that you have to mention it over here. Then some build related settings are also there, right? So budgets, let's say you want to restrict your component CSS, right? Component CSS or component file or HTML file to restrict number of lines of code, right? Number of lines of code means it will be size. So here you can say any component style. So if what are the components I have in my project, if that size exceed by 2 KB, I will get the error while building the application. Means up to 2 KB I will get the warning. If it crosses 4 KB, I will get the error. Same like you can set it for the component also, for HTML file also, and everything. And initial for build also. When we deploy the build, when we are going to take out the build for our Angular project, so we can set the limit, like what is the maximum build size we should get, right? So when you are practicing, it doesn't concern you, but when you are working on the actual project, these are very crucial files or crucial configuration we have. Okay. Then by default, our application runs on localhost 4200, right? But if you need to change the port number by default, so you can add it over here. Instead of 420, let's say 4203. So when if you now run the application, your Angular project will run by default on 4203. So here you can set it. So like this, so many settings are there which are related to your Angular project. So this is about angular.json. After that, package.log.json. So someone will ask you like, what is package.log.json? This is not an important file. Whenever you do the npm install now, so this file will get automatically updated. So you can just say like package.log.json will be updated whenever you do the npm install. It is just to keep the track of the dependencies. Okay, it doesn't have to do anything with the development, right? Then we have tsconfig.json. Since we are working with Angular, in Angular we are working with TypeScript. So TypeScript is also kind of a language. It has a compiler and everything. So it is also going to have some configuration, right? So tsconfig.json. So if you see tsconfig.json, so here are some of the configuration settings we have for TypeScript. Like let's see some of the always use tricks is there. Allow, disable, double check. These are almost all the settings for the TypeScript compilation. Okay. New implicit return. Let me find any. Okay, one file is there like ignore, which I have used. Ignore or skip. Skip lib check. Okay. Strict null check. So this is also one of the important property. If you read data from local storage, right? If you're working on Angular 15 project now, if you read something from local storage or session storage and then directly try to assign it now, it will throw the error like it can be null. So that is the error you are getting because this property is by default true now. So if you want to directly use that without using the null check, na, you just have to add it false over here, strict null check. Like that, one more property is skip library check. Okay, skip lib means lib is for library, means there are some libraries which are not compatible with the latest Angular version. But let's say you have a requirement and you need to use that library anyhow. But when you install that and when you run now, it will give you the error. It will give you error in the node module, right? So if you have such library which is not compatible with the Angular latest version, but you are going to still need it, so you can add this check, skip library check. So it will, what it will do, it will skip the library. It will skip those error, whatever the extra packages you have installed, it will skip that. It won't, what we can say, make it important that it will need for the build, right? So it will skip the libraries. So this is the check for that. So there are so many compilation things are there which you can do in the tsconfig.json, right? Just like that tsconfig spec.json, this is just for the testing purposes there. Okay, then readme file is there just to provide any readme comments whenever we host this project into GitHub. So this is the readme file that will be used over there. Then we have git ignore file. So you all might be familiar with git ignore. So if you have used GitHub and done the commit and compile push pull thing, so you might be aware. So git ignore file is nothing but what are the files you want to ignore while pushing your code onto the server. Okay, it ignores files and folders while pushing code to your repository. Like node module, we don't push it normally to the server, right? Because this is, so here you can say if you need to specify the folder, you just have to add hash like that. If you need to specify particular files, you just have to mention the specific file, right? So there are so many files which are not, let's say it will be separate by system, right? So node module is, because node module will have so much size. Let's see the size. So you can see it is counting. There is no need to upload this kind of files into your repository because this is not our code. Whenever someone is pulling your code, he is going to do the npm install, right? So this node module, it is not supposed to be in the repository. So you can ignore that by adding a entry over here. So git ignore file is, you need to mention all the files and the folder which you don't want to push to the server, right? So those won't be tracked over here. Let's just, for example, if I'm removing this node module entry over here. So currently I just have 7 entries, right? So let's save. Now you can see the files will increase because now it will check all the node module files also for changes. Let it just compile. It is just searching for all the files because in node module file we have tons of files, right? So this will now go, number will go up. It will take time. Okay, so you might have understood like what I was trying to tell you. Then let's go to the editor config. So this is editor. In the name itself it is mentioned like this is a Visual Studio configuration file editor, right? Our editor is Visual Studio, so this is for that configuration file only. Okay, some settings you can off and on off. Then we have src folder. In src folder we have index.html. So since in the beginning we have discussed like Angular is a single page application, so that single page is nothing but index.html. Index.html, right? So this is the single page what we have talked. This is single page which will be running in all application. This overall application, whole our Angular application will be running into this index.html. Now where exactly? So app root. This is a what we can say directive where our Angular application will run. Okay, so overall this This page will be constant, only this thing will be getting changed, right? So that is why now someone will ask you like, can we create any apart from index.html? Let's say I want to name it as a demo.html. So will this work? Yeah, it will work, but we need to change whatever the name you give over here na, into angular.json, because that index.file somehow Angular will know na, like this is our index, means single page single file what we talk. So here you can see the entry. So whatever the file you want as your single page application, that should be mentioned over here. Okay, since I told you like angular.json is a configuration file, it will hold all the configurations. So this is also one of the example you can explain, like index.file is mentioned over here, right? Then we have main.ts. So main.ts is a starting point of our Angular application. Main.ts. Right? So main.ts is the starting point of our Angular application. So when means when Angular application start, it will start from the main.ts. Like how do it know like it is the first file it has to execute? Again, same thing. This main.ts is mentioned in over here in angular.json. You can see main.ts. Okay. So there might be some file, there might be, if you are working, you might have seen in some project instead of main.ts, they will mention it as a index.ts. Any name they can give, but that same name will be mentioned over here, right? So main.ts is our starting point of our Angular application. So first thing, for first file Angular will execute is main.ts. Okay. Now, if we see the main.ts, in main.ts we have a reference of app module, right? After executing main.ts, it will find the app module. Then it will execute the app module from our app folder. This. So you can see angular.json will have an entry of index.html and main.ts. Then main.ts will have an entry of app module. From means after executing main.ts, it will know like what is the parent module, right? Then that parent module will execute. Then app module will execute. And once app module will execute, it will know like what are the components, what are the modules, what are the services, and it has. Okay. So after main.ts, important file is app module.ts, means your first module. Then I mean main.ts is executed, app module is executed. Like then after that, what component it should display? Like there are n number of components, but what will be your first component that should be displayed? So that is mentioned over here. That is bootstrap. This is not our CSS bootstrap. This is bootstrap means bootstrapping the application, starting the application. So what will be your parent application, parent component? I mean first component. So you have to mention whatever the first component you need to use, because when we create the project, app component is our parent component. That is the default nature, but you can change it. So bootstrap in app module.ts, bootstrap means what is the first component that you are going to execute. That component will be mentioned over here. Okay. Now inside a module, you have the declaration, imports, providers, and bootstrap. So let's see in declaration what it can be. If you hover on that now, you can know like what it will contain: component, directives, and pipes. Only three things will be added over here: component, directives, and pipe. Then imports. In import will only contain the modules, the set of modules, right? Then provider, it will only have the services. Before Angular 6, it was necessary whenever you create a service, now it was mandatory to add that service in here, just like the component and direct. But after Angular 6, it is not necessary to add it. By default, it is available globally. Okay. But some services are there like authguard, interceptor, and some extra services that still need to be mentioned in the provider section. So provider will only have the injectable means services. Then bootstrap is like the first component which you need to install, which we need to run, right? So these are the various basic overview Angular questions we have discussed, right? In the next coming videos, we will discussing the interview related, but topic wise. In each video, I will be trying to cover at least 2-3 topics, so that in 5 to 6 video we will complete our whole Angular interview question, right? So that's it with this current video.